feel like the majority of more glam or elevated makeup looks on YouTube either include a really dark or bright bold lip and maybe like a smoky eye. If you have pale skin like me, you may have tried those types of looks in the past and just not felt like yourself or felt like the makeup was wearing you instead of you wearing the makeup. Huh? If you have that problem, this video is going to be so helpful. I'll be giving you all my top tips and tricks, favorite products, and really essential techniques for doing pale skin makeup, but a little bit more elevated, a little bit more glam without feeling like your makeup is overtaking you so you still shine through. That was a little cheesy. If you're not already subscribed, I do a lot of pale skin videos, so make sure you do subscribe so you don't miss them, and give this video a like so you don't lose it and can reference it back if you ever need to. This look is perfect for the holidays, it's perfect for parties, special occasions, wedding guest makeup, anything you want to wear a little extra makeup but still feel like you, this is going to be perfect. So enough talking, let's go ahead and get started. Let's get right into it. First, I prepped my skin. I used these from Typology, which are their vitamin C glow drops. They're very light shades, so they work great for fair skin, and they have a very subtle pearl to them just to give my skin a little bit of glow mixed in with moisturizer. You can also use the Say Glowy Super Gel if you do want to start off with a little bit of glow. I think it really does help the makeup all come together. So when you have pale skin, usually discolorations and imperfections can show up really harshly on our skin because we basically have this very light blank canvas for colors to show through because our skin is just more translucent. So I love to color correct. I think it's a really great way to use less foundation and concealer, still have a really perfected look. So for the under eyes, I really like this one from Pixi. It's their Correction Brightening Peach Concentrate. I think this is so underrated. It's a really nice peachy shade for fair skin, and the amount that you get in here will last you a very long time. Great drugstore pick. If you see it and you have dark under eyes, definitely pick it up. It has a nice light creamy texture, so it doesn't interfere with concealer. It's also not too oily that it makes your concealer slip around, so you can actually see the difference here. Just helps, especially if you have more deep set eyes like I do as well, just helps to fill in that sort of like blank space that I have. If you prefer something really thin, e.l.f. also makes a corrector in like their concealer tubes that are really thin. They have a lot less coverage, but they definitely work if you just like super lightweight feeling products. Next, this has been one of my favorite finds for fair skin at the drugstore. If you have redness, you're gonna love this. The Covergirl Color Correcting Serum, Moisturizer, and Primer. They actually have this in different shades, and this is specifically for fair skin. This is the redness neutralizer, which is what I struggle with the most, so I picked this one up. It has a greenish yellow tint to it. It's a bit of a more moisturizing feel, so really nice if you have more normal to dry skin as well, but it still retains a light consistency, so it doesn't add a ton of weight to the makeup. And as I'm applying this, you should be able to see that it just really eliminates my redness and evens my skin tone, so I don't have to use a lot of foundation to cover up what I want to. I also have really sensitive skin, and this is for sensitive skin as well, so it's really gentle, doesn't irritate my skin, no fragrance in here either. You can use this in just specific areas where you have redness, but having a cool olive undertone, I like to put it all over my face just to end up matching the rest of my body a little bit better. When you wear this under foundation, it is sheer enough. It's not going to alter your foundation shade. It's just going to give you a nice corrected base to work with. So next I want to talk about underpainting, which I think is an amazing technique for fair skin. If you want your contour and face makeup to look very natural, especially if we're doing looks that maybe focus a little bit more on the eyes or the lips, we don't want the skin makeup to be necessarily the star of the show. We want it to be there and look really perfected, but we don't want it to be like, bam, we have contour, bronzer, blush, like you can see them all individually. This will help everything meld together in a really seamless way. So if you are going to do underpainting, which we'll be doing today, I think it's really good to use a slightly more pigmented cream product, such as this one from Fenty Beauty. This is their contour in the shade Amber, which is an amazing cool tone shade for fair skin. It's a really great like stone color. You can also use the e.l.f. Halo Glow, another great fair shade. This one is the Fair Contour. This is definitely less pigmented than the Fenty one, but still great undertone. And the sponge tip isn't my favorite, but it does apply things really precisely. Now, if you don't want to do underpainting and you just want to do something on top of foundation, the KVD Modcon Contour, I mentioned this in all my fair skin videos. It's a gel formula. This one's the shade Fair Cool as well. You can really see a big texture difference. Compared to the e.l.f. one, it definitely has some more neutral warmth to it. Because this is a gel liquid, it's gonna blend out and be really sheer versus a cream that definitely carries more pigment. So when you use this on top of foundation, it's gonna look very natural because it's a sheer wash of color. It's not very easy to mess up because it is so sheer. It really just blends in, and that's one of my favorite contour products on the everyday basis just for adding on top of foundation. If you've never heard of underpainting, by the way, it's a technique of putting creams under your foundation, usually more full pigment creams, in a slightly more dramatic way than you would put on top of foundation. So that's why I like using this Fenty one, is it has a little bit more pigment to it. So I'm gonna take this, it's actually a rose ink concealer brush, but it has a really nice density and shape for contouring. So taking that Fenty contour, I'm gonna start placing this in the contour areas. Should be right under your cheekbones. I'm going to shape my jawline as well. This is a really great technique if you're doing a jawline contour because they can look unblended and harsh sometimes, but when you do it under a foundation just helps to blend it together. I'm also going to be placing a little bit on the top of my forehead. I have more of an oval face shape, so I don't really put a lot of contour here because it's already like a little bit more narrow, so I don't want to like close that in even more. But if you had it like a rounder face or maybe like a heart-shaped face, you could definitely do with some contour right by the brows. So I have a different product for the nose contour, so we're just going to start blending this. I'm also using another rose ink brush. This is their foundation brush, has a nice angle to it. Just something nice and soft that's going to diffuse the color. You don't have to blend this out absolutely perfectly. You just want to make sure that there's no patchiness, but it is okay if it's a little bit harsh almost, because it's the point of putting the foundation over it, is that it's gonna help blend that in. Since that Covergirl primer is also a little bit more moisturizing, it gives us a really nice base that these cream products are going to glide onto. Next up, if you don't have a white concealer, you can skip this step. But I'm going to take a white concealer. This one's from CoverFX. It's the Power Play Concealer in white. I don't think they still sell this one, but there are some other brands that offer white concealer. I know Kimchi Beauty has one. I think LA Girl also has one in just their classic concealer formula. Really good to have on hand if you have fair skin to mix into products or to do as an underpainting technique like this. You can also just use a very light concealer if you have one. So I'm actually going to be applying this with my sponge. I just have some on the back of my hand here. So the point of the white is when you're so fair, sometimes a light enough concealer still doesn't brighten your face enough. So we're gonna take this just straight up and we're gonna put this on the highlight points of the face. So areas that you sort of want to highlight and stick out. So I usually do a little bit under my contour and on top of the cheekbones. I'm applying this with a sponge just to get a bit of a softer effect because we are using a true white formula. I'm gonna do a little bit on my chin and then right in sort of this like center of the forehead area between the brows. You don't want to bring it up too much if you have a bigger forehead like I do, but if you don't, you totally could. And right down the nose. I'm also going to take whatever's left over, just a little bit under the eyes. You can also use blush during this technique. I would just do blush now and then move on to foundation, but I don't really feel like doing that today. I think I just want to do the contour and the highlight. And now we're going to put on the foundation, which everything looks a bit harsh right now, and the foundation is going to go on as a light layer to help everything harmonize together. I'm going to be using a slightly more radiant foundation that still gives me coverage but gives me a natural skin look because, like I said, I don't want the skin to be too strong when we are focusing on doing a bit more of an elevated look. This is the MAC Studio Radiance Foundation I've been loving lately. This is Serum Powered Foundation. There's no sunscreen, really good for sensitive skin as well in the shade range if you have fair skin. This one's actually slightly light for me. This is NC5. They have tons and tons of shades in this foundation, so if you have a hard time finding a match, I would check out this line of foundation. I just like to dot it around my face and then I will start to blend it out and see what kind of coverage we have going. I like to apply this with a sponge. It just helps absorb any extra product. Apply a really light layer so we have a comfortable skin feel and it doesn't feel like we have a ton of makeup on. The reason I like to use more of a medium to light coverage foundation with underpainting as well is you want the underpainting to show through. If you use something too full coverage, you're kind of going to cancel everything out unless you go really heavy with the underpainting. You also want to make sure you take it over that jaw contour and blend it down the neck. And with that light layer, you can hopefully see the effect of the underpainting is you get that contour shadow, but it looks very natural. It doesn't look like I drew something on my face. Now I'm just going to take a look, see if I want a little bit more coverage, which I do, probably a half of a pump. And then I'm just going to place this in the areas I just feel like I need to cover up a little bit more. Before we go in with the concealer, I'm actually going to do a cream/liquid blush. So I have two options here that I really like. First, this is a ceramide blush stick, really good for your skin, really moisturizing, and this color is beautiful. This is from Iris and Romeo. This is their Rosy Glow blush stick. You can also use this on your lips. It's a really pretty mauvey rose and has like a little bit of a very non-visible shimmer in it. Like, it just makes you look so pretty and glowy. If you have like more cool tone skin, I think the shade's great. Actually, before we do blush, this is technically a blush, but I use it in a slightly different way. So this is from Daniel Sandler. These are the Watercolor liquid cheek colors. You can use them anywhere, but this is, I think, technically a blush shade called Golden Glow. And what I'm gonna do is layer this on top as a bronzer shade. I'm gonna show you why. It is very thin and liquidy, and also has a really nice sheerness to it. So if you have fair skin, you're probably familiar with the bronzer dilemma of things look too orange, they look too strong, they look too red. Like, they just show up weird on us most of the time. So taking a really sheer product like this is such a great technique. It has that warmth to it. My camera didn't save like the last 10 minutes of makeup that I just did, but thankfully it was kind of just the basic stuff anyway. So I'm gonna really quickly run through what I did. I just did a concealer using the Haus concealer. Love this, my favorite concealer of all time. It does not crease. They also have a really good shade range for fair skin. So that was just under the eyes and the high points of the face. I also mixed in a little bit of the Cover FX white concealer just for a brightening effect. I also did a nose contour using this eye product from Make Beauty. This is their eye stylo. It's actually on my hand here. I just washed my hands and it's still there, so it is extremely long lasting, which is great if you have more of an oily nose. And this shade Altitude is my favorite because it's a really nice cool stone brown. Watercolor blush that I was using as a bronzer gives you a nice really glowy finish. And I also went in just with another shade as a little layer of blush. And then I just set my face. I used these two powders because they are truly translucent, so they don't deepen your skin when you have pale skin. Look for powders that are like white in the container because that means they have no color to them. Dermablend loose powder, one of my favorites. You can tell on my face, it didn't darken anything, absolutely translucent. And then I took a little bit of the Aloe Mercier brightening powder, which has a bit of shimmer in it, just on the high points to highlight even more. And then the trick I was mentioning earlier for deep set eyes, the Maybelline Fit Me powder in 05 is an amazing, super fair shade. All I do is take this on a smaller eyeshadow brush and only put it right in the hollows of the eyes. And the reason you only want to put it in the hollows is because that's going to bring up sort of that space and make it look like it's on an even plane compared to the rest of the eye area. If you do it in a wider section, it's going to bring everything forward, so it's not really going to fix the difference. But if you only put it in that area, it's going to sort of even things out. So next is optional, but I'm just looking at my face, seeing if I want more of anything. I feel like I could do a little bit more warmth, so I'm actually going to take this Kiko Milano blush. This is the Happy B-Day honey color. I don't think they have this exact one, but it's a really nice dupe for the Hourglass formulas. I really like the Hourglass Nude Bronze Light shade for fair skin. As I mentioned, I have a whole video about my favorites for fair skin. If you need recommendations, check that out. I'm just going to take a really light layer of this just right over that Daniel Sandler bronzer that we use. I also want to do a touch more blush. I'm going to use my RMS French Rose, one of my favorite blushes ever, especially for fair skin. This really cool pink. It looks bright, but it looks gorgeous on the skin and has a lot of glow to it. So I'm just going to layer that on top of the powder. Like I mentioned, these additional powder layers aren't totally necessary. It just depends on how dramatic you want the makeup to look. And it definitely doesn't cover up all that work we did before. You can really still see the contour, that bronzer, the shimmery blush, liquid blush that we have under this glowy blush. Everything comes together for one happy makeup look. And if you really want to amp up your highlighting, this, I love to mention this in my fair skin videos, the One Size Powder Foundation. They make a stage white color, which is a pure white, which is such a good tool to have if you have pale skin. I take this on a sort of domed brush, and this is quite pigmented, so I'm very careful with it, but I just like to pop it on any areas I want to bring forward even more. It's a really great tool to have to bump up brightening and highlighting colors. Now let's talk about highlight, which is a pain point for me having fair skin and maybe for you as well. A lot of highlight colors are too dark or too gold or just look really unnatural on us. So I have 4 options I really want to mention. Let's start with the powder option I have, but it's sort of like a powder cream hybrid. This is from ColourPop. It's their Super Shock Cheek Inflexitarian. This is a really creamy powder. Look at that shade, it's gorgeous. This I think applies the best with the fingers. It is a very, look at that, gorgeous metallic shade of highlight. So it's a little bit more dramatic, but it is basically like a pearly white. gorgeous. And then cream versions, love the Ritual de Fille Phosphine Rare Light Cream Luminizer. These are a little bit more of like a waxy cream, so they're great if you have like more normal to oily skin. Dry skin will love them as well. They just aren't as oily as some other formulas. So you can see this one is slightly dark on my skin, so I sort of use that as like a blush highlight combo. Definitely not as bright as the ColourPop, but still really gorgeous and has a pink tone to it. And then if you really love cream highlights and want a very moisturizing, just out of this world like dewy cheek look, these two are amazing. First, the Merit Beauty. This is called the Highlighting Balm in the shade Kava. This is definitely a more sheer formula, so it can be layered. And because of that, I feel like it just looks so flattering because it has such a sheerness to it. Same goes with this Westman Atelier shade. If you like a really cool tone highlight, this is gonna be your fave. This is the Lit Up shade, which has this really beautiful like purpley blue undertone versus this one that pulls a little bit more champagne, but they have that very gorgeous dewy cheek glow. So I'm thinking I actually want to use this Merit Beauty one to apply it on top of powders. I'm just going to work it on the back of my hand, and then I'm just going to pick it up with my finger so I can tap it on. If you apply it with the stick, there's the possibility that it picks up already the glow. It picks up the powder. But if you apply with your finger, you can do a tapping motion and totally avoid that. I almost forgot, but this is one of my favorite powder highlights for fair skin. If you feel like you've never found a highlighter that is flattering on you, this might be the answer to all those problems. The Haus Labs, their gel powder highlight. This is the Silver Moonstone shade, which I was like, it looked kind of weird, but then I got it and I was like, it is so fair, and the cool tone just goes so well if you have like fair, cool skin. It really does make it look like your own glow and not like something that you put on top of your skin. So really surprisingly natural color. So now that the skin is complete, I'm gonna go ahead and do my brows off camera because that's kind of boring, right? And we'll be back and I'll talk about all my techniques for the eyes. The brows are mostly done and now we're ready to move into eyes. I want to talk about something that's I'm going to be referencing throughout the eye portion of this video. So first off, I want you to put yourself in one of three categories: low contrast, medium contrast, and high contrast. First off is low contrast, which a good example of that is me. So this is basically when all of your features on your face sort of have a similar contrast level. So like me, I have fair skin, I have light hair, and I have light eyes, so there's not a lot of contrast naturally going on in my features. Now if you're medium contrast, you have fair skin, maybe you have a light brown or medium brown hair, maybe like lighter hazel eyes, green eyes, or just brown eyes. And then if you are high contrast, you have fair skin, very dark hair, dark brows, dark eyes. There is a lot of contrast visible in your features. If you're not sure which category, an easy way is you can take a picture on your phone without wearing any makeup, put it in black and white, and then it'll kind of show you if there's a lot of contrast or not. If I were to take one of myself, you wouldn't see a lot of different tones in that picture, but with someone with dark hair, the darkness would really stand out against the pale skin. So the reason that I mention this is because if you're in the medium to high contrast categories, you can definitely pull off darker lips and darker eyes a lot easier than people who are in my category, which is low contrast. So I think in general, when you have fair skin, keeping everything a little bit more muted usually is more natural looking, but keep in mind if you do have darker hair, more high contrast features, you could definitely pull off some more pure blacks, darker smoky eyes, as long as you keep them a little bit softer, and you could do some darker lips as well. I think it's really important to know your undertone. Very common when you have fair skin that you have like a neutral cool undertone, but it's also possible to have a warm undertone. Olive skin, I have a cool olive undertone, which is very hard to tell on camera, but I sort of have a blend of both warm and cool undertones, which makes this sort of greenish hue. Can be a little bit hard to tell, but like I'm not neutral, I'm not pinkish cool, and I'm also not yellow. I just have this blend of tones in my skin, but I do find that I pull off cool neutral shades a lot better. If you are warmer, you should stick with some warmer eyeshadows or just do whatever you like, but you know, these are fair skin makeup techniques, so if you feel like your makeup is looking unnatural, you might be using the wrong undertone of shadows. So two of my favorite palettes here for neutral cool tones: Natasha Denona I Need a Nude. It does have some slightly warmer tones in it, so it's really versatile. I think anyone with fair skin, this is like the perfect like neutral palette for us. Really worth the money. If you're comfortable going full cool tone, I also love the Natasha Denona Xenon palette. I love this. I also think this is really nice for holiday makeup because going more with these wintry tones versus those very warm glam makeup looks that are just like everywhere on YouTube. I'm gonna be using a blend of both of these palettes today. Starting off, you want a really light transition shade. So I'm going into the I Need a Nude palette. This shade is called Fair. It looks like just like a fair skin tone, but as I put it on my eye, you should be able to see that it's actually darker than my skin, but only slightly, which is what we want here. So I'm taking a big fluffy brush and just buffing this in. Transition shade is really important, especially if you're doing a slightly heavier makeup look, because that transition shade is gonna help it blend to your natural skin tone. You don't wanna have like a harsh demarcation line of eyeshadow or anything. And then I'm going to take this shade, which is called Mesh, which is a really nice taupey, still very light shade on that same brush. And I'm just going to start defining the crease of the eye. When you're doing eyeshadow, always start with the lightest tones and move into darker, because if you're putting down a dark shade, you definitely want a couple of transition shades to blend that into. Next, I'm going to go into the Xenon palette. I realized that this palette is so good at toning down eyeshadows. So maybe if you have a lot of palettes and you just want to like tone down those shades, what I do is take this shade here, which almost has like a slight yellowish hue to it, but it is very, very light. It's called Flurry. And on that same brush, I just like to go over those shades that I put down. It's sort of like, you see what it did to that? It just made it a little bit more cool toned, and it just does this like really cool mudifying effect. That's definitely not a word, but I'm taking that same shade Flurry, which is very light. This is so good for the lower lash line as well, and I'm just going to blend that right under there. In the Xenon palette, I'm going with this very light, it's almost a white, it has like a slight gray tone to it. It's really flattering and almost like an undescribable undertone. Like I've never seen this whitish gray in any palettes. I'm just gonna put this on the brow bone, a little bit in the inner corner. Right now I'm sort of just building the base for the eye look. So a lot of makeup tutorials on YouTube, when they're doing more glam, dramatic looks, they usually go for darker shades, smoky eyes. Any sort of like deeper smoky look is considered more dramatic. But if you have fair or pale skin and you just feel like those looks overtake you really, really easily, one of my favorite tips is if you want to elevate and do a slightly more dramatic look, you don't always have to just think of darker shades. You can play around with textures and finishes that'll make it a lot more dramatic and elevated than your normal makeup without necessarily using dark shades. So a good example of this is these Natasha palettes are perfect. They have so many glitter and shimmer finishes that you can play around with that definitely give you that like glam, holiday, special occasion vibe without having to use, you know, smoky blacks. But I still want to show you how you can deepen up an eye look and still have it look natural on you. So going back into the I Need a Nude palette, I'm going to take this sort of next deeper taupe shade, which is called Tender, on a smaller brush. I'm just going to start carving out the outer corner and crease. Sometimes I will lay down the color first and then really go in and blend, just to make sure they're even on both sides. Since we already have that really nice base of colors, when we are putting down these deeper shades, it's gonna blend in super seamlessly and you're not gonna see any sort of patchiness or lines. And another key technique with this is when you're using the darker shades, just make sure they are in line with your undertone if you want them to look more natural. You might have heard before that for blue eyes, really warm tones make them pop. And they do because it's the opposite of blue. Blue is cool tone, so if you put warm tones, it draws more attention to the cool tones. But if your goal is to make your makeup look less like makeup and more harmonious with you and just really cohesive, you want to use colors that are in line with your tones and not opposite. So it's like they can have their uses, but what I'm going to be doing here is making sure I'm using shades that go in line with my undertone. Looking back to that palette, I'm going to actually take this gray shade here. This is the Xenon palette. This one's called Snert. I love saying that. But this gray, I'm sort of going to place right on the outer corner and V of my eye, blending it in with that taupey brown. And this is gonna do the same thing that that previous transition shade did that was from this palette, is it does mute things down. It's gonna add a little bit of drama, also add to the coolness of the look. So for me, this is about as smoky as I like to do, but if you have higher contrast features, you could probably pull off a little bit more. So next is where I feel like we can really start to play with the textures of eyeshadows. I'm gonna go back into the I Need a Nude palette. This shade right here, it is a smoother metallic, so it doesn't have have a ton of chunkiness to it. It's called Delilah. It's a taupey cool brown. And I'm gonna place that right on the outer corner. I think if you have fair skin, using darker shades on the outer corners, keeping things bright on the inner corners, usually a little bit more flattering, but also maybe specifically if you have eye shape similar to mine that's closer together. I don't like adding a lot of darkness to my lid because it sort of closes that area in. But if you have more far set eyes, I think actually using a dark all over could be beneficial. So I definitely want to pick a more chunky metallic shade out of these two palettes to use on the center of the lid. There's really only one very chunky metallic in the I Need a Nude, and it's this one, which is one of the more like neutral, warmer shades in the palette. So I think I want to go really cool and go with this silver one called Supersonic. I'm just going to take a little bit of eye primer. This one is from Ulta Beauty, just their matte eye primer. I definitely want it to have something to stick to. So the trick with this is I like to apply the primer and then I don't let it set completely because I still want it a little bit tacky. And then I go in with the shade and press it right on the top. That way we don't have fallout either. So instantly this look is pulling really fun and glam, but we didn't use any intensely dark shades. We just played with the textures with a finer metallic on that outer corner and then this really sort of chunkier, just really in your face formula. For the brow bone, I want to take a little bit of shimmer. So I'm going to take this shade from the Xenon palette. It just looks like white on camera, but it is a really gorgeous light silvery shimmer. You could also use the Haus Labs silver highlight, and I'm just going to pop that on the brow bone. Also going to pop this on the inner corner. This is one of the finer metallics, so again it's going to be playing around with different textures. Next, one of my favorite tips for fair skin, it's also specifically if you have softer features or if you're lower medium contrast like I am, instead of doing a sharp wing liner, which probably would look really good on high contrast people, but I love doing a smoky liner, and it sort of depends on what shade you want to use. If you have a cooler tone, you could use like a really nice gray shade. If you're neutral, you can use a neutral brown, and if you have a warm undertone, you could of course use a warm brown. And then I would reserve a black sort of smoky liner for those of you with high contrast, because that's going to look really great. I always find brown looks a lot softer on me. It looks more harmonious. It doesn't look as intense. It definitely has its place. I love doing a black liner, but for this look, I'm going to go back into the I Need a Nude palette, that darkest brown right there, which is called Silhouette. I've also used these deep navy blues in the Xenon palette, and they go gorgeous, especially with this look. I want to change it up a little bit though. So for this, you can lay down a pencil liner and then smoke it out with shadow. I just like to use shadow. It's really easy, and I just like to start by stamping on the general shape that I want. And then once I have the shape on, sometimes I will take actually a metallic shade and blend it out if I want to do a metallic liner, but I'm just going to go back into that same brown shade but on this flat brush, and I'm just going to start to smoke out the shape. So I always start it a little bit thinner, and then you add on the shadow to increase the thickness, and that's what gives you the smoky effect. And then another great use for this stage white foundation is on a flat brush. You can use it to clean up the liner and eyeshadow for really professional finish. Another reason why I love powder as a wing is because it's really easy to clean up if you make a mistake. I actually love how the more neutral brown looks with these ultra cool tones because it's almost complementary. Still looks really cohesive with the cool tones. For waterline eyeliner, I would definitely avoid black unless you have a high contrast. But if you're like me, I really like to stick with either like medium or light shades, especially if they have a shimmer in them. One of my favorite tricks, I feel like they make your eyes twinkle and they're just so pretty. So I have one that's like a bit darker. This is Victoria Beckham. This is the shade Bronze, which is this really pretty dirty gold. I think it looks great on blue eyes, but it's also not too dark. But I really love using a light shade like this one from ColourPop. NYX also has some good light shimmery ones in their gel liner formula. This is a really pretty light pink. So I drew this on the waterline, and then I also sort of draw it on the lower lash line on the inner corner for a little bit of brightness. So we're almost finished up with the eyes, but still a really important step is mascara. If you're low or medium contrast, try out a brown mascara or maybe even like a maroon mascara, something that's not as dark as black. Maybe a really good guide for this would be if you're low contrast like me, stick with true brown. If you're medium contrast, maybe do a black brown shade. And then if you have high contrast, you could probably just use a black mascara. This is like one of the most game-changing things that I've done to my makeup routine is just start using brown liner and mascara, and it just, I feel like looks so much better on me. This is the Maybelline Sky High Mascara, by the way. I love a really dramatic lash, so I just layered that up. It also goes so nicely with the brown eyeliner. Those tones tie together really well. Also forgot to mention this, but we did do this more neutral, dramatic look, but if you wanted to play with color, you totally could, just using the same techniques and then maybe making sure that they're within your undertone. So for me, I really like playing with purple because that is a cool tone. I think it looks really nice. If you have warmer skin, you could do like really warm reds or pinks. So there is a lot of wiggle room if you want to add even more fun touches. While the mascara is drying, let's bounce to the lips. I'm going to first do a lip liner and then we'll talk about some techniques. For lips, I just recommend the same as like the eyeshadow that I was talking about within your undertones. For me, that's cool tones. This is a really nice cool toned taupe. So the lip advice I have is pretty similar for eyeshadow, is making sure that your lipstick is within your undertone. If you feel like you could never pull off a bold lip, you're definitely probably just wearing the wrong colors. If you want to go even more in depth with this, you could learn your color season and that would probably make things really easy. But just fitting that within the low, medium, and high contrast. If you have low contrast, lighter shades in general, you don't want anything that's too dark or rich or bold because it's probably just going to overtake you really easily. But if you have that medium contrast, just make sure it's like a similar contrast to your skin, right? So it's like, for me, something that's a little bit lighter, even if it is more of a bold color, something that's a lighter version of that. For medium contrast, a medium version of a bold color. And then if you have that high contrast, that's when a like red lip is going to look amazing on you, either a nice dark shade or a really bold color. So let's talk about my favorite shades of more bold lips on me. For me, a bold lip is definitely a totally different thing than people who have that higher contrast. First is this Urban Decay Vice Bond formula, which I love. The Back Talk line has amazing neutral cool shades. This is Love Ya Back Talk, which doesn't look that dramatic, but on me it definitely pulls like a bold berry. And then I have this one from 100% Pure, which is called Wine Cup. It's a really cool pink and definitely like a bit of a darker lip for me. And then I also have this Flower Beauty. This is like a sheer satiny formula. This is the Blush Rose, which is a nice, more muted shade. That literally looks like a natural shade on my hand, but on my lips, I feel like it pulls a little bit more dramatic. If you're on that high contrast category, this shade from Bobbi Brown. This is the Luxe Matte Lipstick in After Hours. It's a really nice cool tone red. If you have cool tone skin, this would be gorgeous. I also have this one from Oma Beauty, which is a really pretty, rich, cool tone brown. I think I'm going to try on the Wine Cup shade for you to show you that we have a little bit more of a dramatic eye going on, but with the right shade, you can also do quite a more bold lip. These are such good formulas. I like to pair this with a taupey lip liner like I did to mute it down even more. I like to apply it and then go in my finger to blend out the color and really work it into my lips, and it shears it down a bit. So this pulls like it is a bolder lip on me, but still looks relatively natural. I think I'm also going to add a little bit of the Oma Beauty shade. So if you feel like you could never pull off a red lip, try out a berry shade like this, or a really nice soft red that's a cool tone, something that's a lot more muted and less saturated if you're lower contrast like me. And then I think a nice nude light gloss is really nice to have on hand to neutralize or sort of lift the color of any lip. This one's from Pixi. If you have cool tone skin and you find like a lot of lips run warm on you, it's also so good to have a blue gloss like this on hand. Milk Makeup makes one. They've been trending a little bit lately. I'm gonna do a little bit of this as well because that also just helps to amplify and make it a little bit more cool tone. I feel like that really ties in the silverness of the eye too. Moving back to the eyes, I'm going to put on some of these wispy lashes from Ardell. House of Lashes actually just started making lashes that have brown hair in them, which is so amazing because I wear brown mascara. These lashes are black, but it will blend with the brown to make it a little bit softer. But I definitely want to try those ones out. Just using good old clear duo lash glue. You don't want to use black if you don't have a black liner on. I always like to go in with a brown shadow after the lashes are applied and press it onto the lash band to sort of tint that brown and have it match the liner. Here is my finished glam elevated version of pale skin makeup. I really hope you found this video helpful and enjoyable. Don't forget to give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss my next video on pale skin. But if you do want even more tips and tricks, I have 2 more videos for pale skin here. Pick one of those and I will see you there. Bye.